next panelist, could Mr. Anuj Dayal, Ms. Nisha Narayan, Mr. Siddharth Chaturvedi, and Mr. Shubhashish Dey please join us on stage?
We have a set of senior dignitaries with us in the panel today, and it's a diverse mix between radio, government, philanthropy, and me also coming from philanthropy incidentally. So the way we would like to have this session, and we have around now 40 minutes. Request is the panelists to give 5 minutes of introductory remarks. Please keep it to 5 minutes so that we have some time for discussion among the panel. Over to you. Yes, over to you, ma'am.
This is on everyone's business, climate change as everyone's business. So this is another distinguished panel, and I'm sorry I'll have to leave early, so I'm taking the first chance. So on everyone's business, I think, continuing from what I was saying, I think life has that everyone's business issue. Reduce waste, reduce the use of plastic, use public transport, a litany of activities. I had in fact noted many of them because they are very important not to be kind of, not noted. Use non-conventional energy, preserve water, reduce the single-use plastic usage, sustainable food systems. This year is a year of millets, and sustainable food systems I think is extremely important. And the International Year of Millets is kind of, making, again coming back, 20-25 years back, I think when we were all young, and some of you may have been when you were all children, but when we were all young, millets used to be a part of our lifestyle. Ragi dosa, ragi being a part of ragi porridge, bajra, jar, all of these, even if they were used infrequently, they were a part of our dietary practices. But at some point of time, we gave much of this up. So we are back to, it's some kind of a cyclical change that we are now experiencing, where we are saying preserve, preserve, preserve. At one point of time, when electronic goods started coming in, we are now saying reduce e-wastage. But there was a time when every 2 years we were changing the mobile phone models. We were changing our laptop models. We went from this kind of this kind of a desktop to that kind of a laptop, and then we said each kind of laptop has its own adapter. So today we are talking about a single USB use, so that it could be single chargers, single adapters. So there is a lot of awareness, I think, that has come about. And I think at the time, there was this entire song about the girl being a plastic girl, and she was very excited to be in plastics. In fact, steel buckets used to be used in our bathrooms, in our, what we call washrooms now, right? But those were replaced by plastic, and they were for a particular use. They were useful at that point of time. But what exactly is it now that we are trying to look at? How are we making this change? How are we going to look at those small things that happen in our own lives, and are we going to change those? I think handlooms coming back in such a huge manner has been a major change in favor of climate action. The going out of synthetics in general from general wear has been something that has been happening. Linen has come in, cotton has come in. So synthetic fibers are slowly going out. So question now is how affordable, how accessible do these things happen? Because some of them are now back, but with a style statement, with a class image attached to them. So how are we going to spread this across? How are we going to bring everyday practices to everyone? I think that is a challenge. And we need again to think of innovative ways by which this can be done. Community radio comes in handy again. I will not delve into that because we know the power of community radio. So I will not really go into what you can do. You are the biggest storytellers. Picking up community people and telling their stories back to them is what you do. And in a manner that they think, because storytelling has been seen as recreational. But you have converted that recreation into a thought process. So to that extent, everyday practices, I will urge all community radios to please look up the life document. In fact, the MOEFCC went one step further. They had sketches by children on how they are using life in their lives. So I think this is something that the government of India has kind of brought in hugely, and we need to see its impact in every village, every town, every particular household. So with that, I will not take too much of time, except urge you to all to make your life. So thank you all very much. Lifestyle for environment. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jaya ma'am. Now over to you, Nisha.
Good evening, everyone. Archana, I must thank you for insisting that I come. It's really nice to see a room full of delegates and audience, and the delegates who are not from the radio fraternity, but really believing in radio and the power of radio. So I must thank you for that. I'm going to keep this really very short, just to say that all radio, not just community radio, but commercial radio, private FM radio, community radio, all radio contribute to this change, and it has to be one voice. It's climate action and not really climate change. And it is not something which is a one campaign that we need to do on our radio stations. It is something that has to be more continuous. It has to be something which is 24/7, 365 days in the year. That is one consistent content that we have to embrace, and we have to educate all our RJs, our producers, our content creators to understand that, and I think that is extremely important. And it's a myth that commercial radio don't really do development programs. We just do it in a little more fun manner, we just do it in a little more interesting manner perhaps, but they do a lot of development programs, and I don't say it only for Red FM, but I say it for all radio channels in the private FM space, that everybody they do their own bit. It's just that they just try and make it a little more interesting or engaging or connect with the listeners a lot more. That would be all from my end. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha. Over to you, Mr. Dayal.
I represent Delhi Metro Rail Corporation. How many of you have traveled on the metro? Now, if you had not traveled on the metro, you would have traveled by road, by car, by bus. Doubtful if you would go by cycle, it's very dangerous. Which means that as far as climate change is concerned, whatever other mode of transport you would have chosen would have led to pollution. So metro coming, fully driven by electricity, it's completely pollution free. So that's one of the biggest contributions of Delhi Metro to Delhi. 60 lakh journeys are performed on Delhi Metro today, per day. Those 60 lakhs, if they had not been performed on Delhi on the metro, those already Delhi, in spite of the metro, it's so cluttered, so crowded. It takes an hour and a half traveling on the roads. So if those 60 lakh journeys were not performed, we have a network of 390 kilometers, even then it is so crowded. And so environmentally, for a big city like, we are very late in the field. First metro was in London in 1863. They are now around 400 kilometers after such a long time. We started our construction in 98. 2002 we opened the first line. We are almost 400 kilometers. So we have gone very fast, accelerated very fast. Another 60 kilometers we are building. And we had many firsts. Number one, when we were constructing the project, we said that for every one tree that has to be cut, we will plant 10 as compensatory afforestation. Then we fixed the alignment in such a way that minimum number of trees would be cut. Then we are the first railway system, forget about metro, in the entire world to get carbon credits from the United Nations, because our trains, when they brake, regenerative braking, 33% of the energy is reused in the system. And we have all our stations are green stations. 1/3 of metro runs on solar power. We generate our own power now. All the rooftops, they have solar panels. And from Madhya Pradesh, from an offshore site, we are also drawing solar power. So, and the station designs now you will see they have a lot of, we use a lot of natural lighting to save on energy and a lot of LED lighting. In this journey, the media has played a very big role. Now, since this seminar is on radio, ma'am, your Red FM and other channels, they have been very effective and they have portrayed us very well. Your RJs have conveyed messages. Even the RJs are very I mean, they are full of life. So their communication is so good. A sentence from an RJ, it has much more impact than, your whole newspaper article which has 4 columns. People generally read the headline. Readership has gone down tremendously now, but radio is still alive. I won't deny All India Radio its role also. Even for now, last a year or so, I have not been going, but they have been calling me for these phone-in channels and the traditional AM radio. And early in the morning, around I think 9 o'clock or so, listeners keep calling. There's a whole constant lot of listeners, primarily not in the heart of Delhi, but they are from the areas on the peripheral sides of Delhi, slightly rural type of background, but their interest in the whole thing is quite tremendous and quite heartening. So radio has contributed a lot in our communication strategy, and I think radio is a medium I personally am very comfortable with. It's a very reliable medium, and I think it's a good balance between TV and the print media. Now, of course, we have our own media. We all have social media handles. So we are controlling ourselves also to a large extent what we want to disseminate. Earlier, that was not so. And television, it's a very, very wide open topic. What you want, what their TRPs want, what you say, what goes on the editing table, what you have said 5 years back is mixed up with something today. So that's a very open type of sensationalism. Radio has not gone that way. Radio has still been very, very balanced. And personally, I feel very comfortable about the radio. I'll stop here. If later on, if there are any questions you would like to ask, I'll be very happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dayal. Over to you, Siddha.
Yeah, thanks, Subhashish, and thanks to the co-panelists. Fantastic comments. I'll try to be brief. Means that there was a lot of talk before we kind of got on the panel, and it got me thinking. First of all, I think radio has evolved, and the way radio has evolved is even if you go on YouTube and we play a song, it says whether you want a radio mix. So the radio word is still alive there. Whether traditional radio has evolved into that kind of a thinking of technology, integration of technology, that remains to be seen. And again, the evolution in terms of means we don't read books, but Audible has really taken off, which I see as kind of a manifestation of voice, right? And there's a product, I'm talking more in terms of technology and its integration. A product that kind of brought back HMV or Saregama was Caravan, which looks like a traditional radio, gives the feel of a traditional radio. So radio, as I said, is there and will remain. The question is how is radio integrating with the new technologies and what avenues are there? Now, more, if I look at climate change per se, then we are talking, I know, more on the community radio side, and we were talking about the curriculum that has just been launched for the community. My submission, and I don't know the details, so pardon me if it's my limited rationality here. My submission is that if that kind of a curriculum can be extended to ground level functionaries across the board, including government functionaries, because even things we think we understand, we really don't. So there are across rural development programs, we think we can tell the community how banking is done, we don't know half of it. We think how enterprise is done, we don't know half of it. And we know we can't tell them climate change, but we still think we'll tell them. So there's a lot of capacity building that's needed, even for people who think that they know. And please, I'm not speaking from a pedestal, I'm speaking as a student, and I'm requesting everyone if they can help me understand better. Another thing, ma'am, you mentioned, I just thought I would react to that, is that Earth will remain. And we need to, the general discourse is we need to save life. I think what the discourse needs to change, is now changing slightly, is we need to save livelihoods. And the other bit I would say is where you started again, and its topic is climate change is everyone's business. But I feel that climate change is not yet a business. That's why it hasn't really taken off. So if it starts becoming a business where people start seeing profit, it may start taking off. It's still a social development goal. One more thing, pardon me for the long opening, Subhashish, is that one of the things is what ma'am was saying about whether we are holding back and whether we understand Ragi. Ragi was there already. And then we had, means if you go to Bihar, Sattu is still prevalent. It's hard to sell a Nutri-Bar because they are already consuming Sattu. In terms of how do we monetize it, or how do we say what impact it is having, whether it's helping the government, means I'm just bringing a regional perspective because it's also about G20 and India represents the region in some ways. Bhutan has something known as a sustainable development fee. And that's $200 per night for someone who's not from a SAARC country. That's $200 per night. So if we think that some of the things that we do are really causing harm to the environment, are we making them unaffordable in any way? The last thing I would just say is, and this is my humble request to all the radio channels present here, that I think Prasar Bharati really takes a lead when it comes to educating people. And the radio channels, the FM channels in the urban centers are real catalysts because people who are listening to that, if they do get some ideas, they go to the rural areas and start working with them. But that bridge has to be drawn from both sides, not just the community radio, but also from the urban center, it should go to that side. And I'll pause there for the moment. Thanks, Prashish.
Thank you, Siddharth. Since we have the privilege of having Jaya ma'am still here, so I'll shoot just one short and sweet question. We have talked about lifestyle and environment. You have talked about how the rural community had been living with harmony with nature, which is not the case for many of us here. So how do you, what are the steps which the government is taking, not necessarily the Ministry of Ministry of Tribal Affairs, not necessarily the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, but government is taking to make it a mass movement?
So as I said, one is the place where it was unveiled. I think that gave it quite a bit of visibility. The person who unveiled it, the life movement, if I may say so, I think that also gave a lot of gravitas to it. The third is all these measures are now being disseminated, I think, through schools, etc. My ministry is, of course, not dealing with it, but looking at whatever has been done in the MOEFCC, I find that they are trying to bring this to the grassroots, to the household community levels. And the entire idea is, look at the supply side. You were talking about this becoming a business. So the entire idea was, look at the supply side, change behaviors at the supply side, and change the demand side so that the supply side would need to willy-nilly respond. So if I no longer want a plastic plate for, say, my birthday parties for my kid, I will certainly start looking for an environmental friendly alternative. So then somebody will have to start producing it. So it's a question of who comes in first. So there is this notion that you start creating that demand. At the demand side, the supply side will respond, and once there is some kind of a the match between them, then the policy would be right in place to be put in, so that there is a kind of a holistic take on it. I know this is some kind of a huge ask, because changing behaviors take time, but that is where advocacy is being done. That is where advocacy is being done, and that is where these kind of fora are very important. Because changing behavior, knowing that there are alternatives, Changing behavior comes when you know there are alternatives and they are affordable alternatives. So these alternatives are the ones that are being looked into. So tribal products, I would advocate one must have a look at those tribal products. Not only the bamboo products that are in display here, but also in terms of sal leaves, or in terms of leaf plates, in terms of donapatti. So I find that now in many marriages, you have donapatti being given as a matter of statement. So I think those are the kind of things that we are looking at. Thank you all so much.
So from the cue of what ma'am has said about change of behavior, DMRC incidentally had been pioneering that behavior change in many of us by leaving our cars at home and taking the Delhi metro. So from your experience, like what were the key drivers through which you could make that change possible, and what kind of communication tools you might have used in past?
Subhashis, this was a big question when we started the metro, because there's a quantum jump in that communication requirement. In 2002, when we started the metro, there were no escalators in Delhi. Only Taj Palace Hotel and the airport had. And metro has a lot of escalators. It has automatic doors. The automatic fare collection gates close. And the area we started was Shadrat Tisazari. So people were very scared that they will get stuck while, in between the doors. They will fall off the escalator. The sari will get stuck. So we put sari guards, we put volunteers everywhere. We had to have a huge communication strategy. Not in the newspapers. We had to go to grassroots nukkad nataks. नुक्कड़ नाटक में जाके हमने डेमोन्स्ट्रेट किया ढोल बजा के कि ये बिजली का सीडी है, डरो नहीं इससे, और दरवाजे ऑटोमेटिकली क्लोज होते हैं लेकिन इतना देर के लिए खुला रहता है. सो लॉट ऑफ कॉन्फिडेंस जनरेशन वाज रिक्वायर्ड अमॉन्ग द पब्लिक in the initial days. I have seen rickshaw pullers and all standing outside Shadra station and looking at the rickshaw with their children with awe. उसको हिम्मत नहीं हो रही थी अंदर जाके, इतना it's a huge look at his mind यार. और टोकन खरीदेगा, गेट पे खुलेगा and the gate will close, then escalator, then metro. It's a huge. We were going from India was moving towards Europe. So it was a very big communication and interesting challenge. And we changed the strategy because earlier our communication was basically in TV and print media. That which was very positive, but not everybody reads newspapers. So we had to go really to the grassroots to be effective in communications. This continued for about a year and a half because every 6 months we were opening sections. Then gradually people got used to the system.
Thank you, sir. Nisha, you have talked about how the commercial radio had been successful and we had all had heard, be it Radio Mirchi or Red FM or Magic FM, and then the RJs talking a lot about, in Delhi, we all of us heard about air pollution and what we need to do and not need to do during air pollution. And that was done in a much fun way. My experience with community radio had been limited, but you have said that you do it in much funnier way than maybe the traditional community radio. So my question for you would be that do you have any strategy to take that learning to the masses? Masses being the people who cannot hear to the commercial FM radios, maybe staying in the hinterland, and bring them on board so that their way of deliberation is as engaging as yours.
Okay, so just to answer that, one, we of course create a lot of content which is towards climate action. But that being said, what we are ready to do as commercial broadcasters, as Red FM, would be to provide that content to community radio stations to broadcast it further. We'd be happy to do that, right? One of the steps we've taken, of course, is to take podcast and do podcasts very aggressively. But again, podcast audience is still growing, it is still limited, but then it has a very high shelf life. The content is there to stay. That being said, the moment these things are documented, like Jayaji, she spoke about the tribal communities and how they live and how they're so close to nature. Now, if you're documenting that and we're putting it out on the urban cities, we're happy to share that content with community radio to further broadcast it. I think that's one thing that we can do. We can perhaps do training. We can give a lot of training to community radio as commercial radio stations, and we do that as well in many ways. There are a couple of them, a couple of community radio stations that opened in Jammu and Kashmir. which is run by the Indian Army. So we've been training them as well. So we are happy to provide content, and that has never been an issue. I hope this addresses your question.
Thank you, Nisha. My last question is for Siddharth, and then I hope I'll open it up for the audience and take 2-3 questions from there. So climate change is now almost a one-way journey. It's happening. We are hearing about loss and damages, and you had been working on the agricultural sector, if I'm not mistaken. My question for you is that for Indian context, what I understand is that a lot of loss, or rather the challenges to food security is multiple, and one of them is because of we do not have a proper supply chain in place, supply chain, cold chain in place. So what are the initiatives which the Gates Foundation is currently taking to address those issues, if any, and if you could share your thoughts on that?
No, thanks, Subhashish. That's like a very heavy question, as you know. So I would just like to say that climate change is part of a puzzle. When we start talking in terms of vulnerability reduction or anything like that, so climate is just a lens. So what Noam was saying earlier and other speakers were saying, there's a host of things like infrastructure, financial access, etc., etc. So to say this is something we are doing for climate change and everything we are doing is for climate change is what we call as greenwashing. So we need to I just wanted to flag that. On the question that Subhashish asked, so there are certain specific elements on climate that we are trying to address from an agriculture perspective. And the cold chain piece is somewhere there, but that is more around the food systems piece, wherein we are trying to say, okay, how do we reduce losses in the post-harvest side? How do we make food more nutritious so that the nutritious content is not lost? But more specific to climate change, I'll say 2-3 things. First is that we are trying to build predictive analytics based on local and satellite data so that can be fed to the government for evidence-based policy making. 2 is we work with the governments for effective resource utilization. So there is an announced budget, but then coming down to the interventions and translating that into action is something we try to do. More specifically, we are also trying to work on some of the financial products that can make climate smart agriculture more affordable for the farmers, especially the smallholder farmers. And then the last piece is that we are looking at existing practices that are already climate smart, but are not recognized as such.
So I'll open up the floor if there are any burning questions. I see one hand there. Any other?
5 से 6 से 7 साल तक मतलब बहुत सारे ऐसे यंग जेंटलमैन हैं जो इंस्पायर्ड हैं इन कमर्शियल रेडियो स्टेशन लाइक रेड एफएम, रेडियो मिर्ची एंड ऑल. तो मैम 5 से 6 साल 7 साल तक वो काम कर रहे हैं, लेकिन वो कमर्शियल अभी भी नहीं पहुंच पाए हैं. कारण उसके क्योंकि मैम हम लोग हैं श्रोताओं नमस्कार आप सुन रहे हैं, और वो टोन लाना हाय दिस इज आरजे वीर एंड यू आर लिसनिंग टू फला फला, तो वो टोन ला पाना क्योंकि हमारे लिए डेली रूटीन का नहीं है, हमें वो श्रोताओं नमस्कार ही यूज़ करनी है. तो इस चैलेंज से वहाँ तक पहुँचने का सफ़र कैसे होगा, ये आपसे हम जानना चाहेंगे.
I don't know if I'm giving the right answer, Archana, correct me if I'm wrong, but then I'm just saying, what is stopping you from saying hi? Namaskar आप बोल सकते हैं, आप hi भी बोल सकते हैं. You know, you can start the way you say it. Just because you're part of community radio does not mean that you have to speak very seriously. You can speak the way you are. You can speak and engage with your listeners. What is stopping you from doing that? Please don't stop yourself from doing that. Right? So there is no hard and fast rule. These are rules that we all make ourselves, saying that, you know, this is how you should speak and this is how you should not speak. As long as it is sticking to the All India Radio Code of Conduct, then I'm saying you can be as free, as entertaining as anybody else in the bigger cities.
Climate change discourse में हम लोग काफ़ी समय हमें सुनने को आता है कि हम लोग बातें बहुत करते हैं, ज़मीनी तौर पे काम बहुत कम होता है. But to me, dialogue is not bad. Dialogue is actually the essence of democracy. Any democratic framework, you have to have enough dialogue in place, and we have seen in many of our neighbors who are not, unfortunately, democracy, dialogue takes a backseat. and then we might have actions, but many of those actions have detrimental impact. In terms of what philanthropies can do, philanthropies can create evidence, it can create enabling framework for having the dialogues in place. Few of the philanthropies can do pilot projects, but at the end of the day, a lot of onus lies with the policymakers and the government machinery. And I'll give you an example what I meant. We can create evidence that renewable energy is good, but at the end of the day, how electricity is produced is a union and as well as state subject. It's a concurrent subject. The state and the union government takes the decision there. What kind of fuel would be provided for your vehicles, that is again a subject of the union government. So they take that call based on various factors, and obviously climate change is one of them. So the role which we can play is maybe a catalytic role, but at the end of the day, the real implementation lies with the government. Again, the community radio can play, or rather radio or communication can play an important role in bringing in voices from the ground. At this point of time, I can vouch for that no citizen in India ask for changes which can restrict climate change. Even for air quality, which is so obvious in front of our eyes, it's not a political issue. Until it becomes a political issue, people start voicing that, yes, we demand good air, good water, good weather, and nothing is going to change to the level what we expect at this point of time. We can do some small changes here and there.
Okay, I think Subhashish, you've touched upon most of the things. I think what philanthropies do is they fund good ideas, and that's very easy. But I'll give a couple of examples. Like, if you remember, there was an Unnat Chula Abhiyan because we spoke about women-centric climate change, and it's been 15 years, we still have the same chulas being exhibited across all conferences. So we try to fund new ideas, we try to work with the governments, what Subhashish said, generating evidence, also bringing in a bit of technology, just keeping the North Star that we are working for the smallholder farmer, whether the vehicle is from the government, from the NGOs, directly with the farmers. And I think one thing we just need to realize is, means I use this word quite often, is gestalt, which is that the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And we should just work towards that and de-jargonize. This is my pet peeve. We need to de-jargonize. I love radio, what she said. If we can say the same thing, which in Three Idiots he says, "ये क्या कह रहे हो? आसान भाषा में कह सकते हो क्या?" That is a fundamental thing when it comes to climate change, at least in my book.
Thank you, Siddharth, and we'll close the panel for today.